I tell parents there is no one look to disordered eating or an eating disorder.
Right.
You can't look at a gymnast and decide whether or not you think they're struggling. And these struggles are often so private and so vulnerable that if a parent or coach does pick up on some sort of food or body image struggle, it's probably like 20 times worse than you can kind of assess.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the NGA podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Grady, and I am here with my incredible co-host,
Dr. Ian Kreider.
Rob Axelrod.
All right, so today we're talking about a topic in gymnastics that doesn't really get a lot of attention, and I think it's happening more so because of the misunderstanding of how it presents itself in gymnastics. So we wanted to bring Christina in, which we will introduce her in a second, but to discuss eating disorders. When most people think of eating disorders, they picture these extremes. But in gymnastics, what shows up most, it's a little bit quieter. It blends in. It can hide behind discipline, work ethic, and it can hide behind that idea of I'm being perfect, I'm doing everything right. And that can be really easy to miss. So what makes this conversation especially challenging is that there are a lot of early warning signs that look like traits that are valued in our sport. So our goal is simply to kind of slow this topic down today, take some time to expand on the misunderstanding, reduce some of that fear around this topic, and how we can support our athletes earlier. So Ian is going to take the reins. We're so excited to introduce Christina here.
All right, Christina Anderson, also known as the gymnast nutritionist, is a registered dietitian, sports nutritionist, and is board certified in pediatric and adolescent nutrition. She works exclusively with gymnasts from compulsory through elite, including U.S. national team members. She has an extensive background in gymnastics as a former competitive gymnast and has served for 16 years as a nationally rated developmental program and NCAA women's artistic gymnastics judge. She regularly lectures at gymnastics clubs, clinics, and conferences, including USAG Regional and National Congress. Her practice, Christina Anderson, RDN, the gymnast nutritionist, provides nutrition therapy, coaching, and support to competitive gymnasts and their families, helping them to unlock optimal performance and longevity in the sport through a realistic approach to nutrition. Welcome, Christina.
Thanks, Ian and Rebecca. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think the first thing I really want to ask you is just where did your passion come from to get into nutrition and specifically gymnastics?
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic that this is the topic of the day, but I think my own interest in nutrition stemmed from my own disordered eating that started in gymnastics. You know, a lot of just what was said in the gym, what was said to older teammates of mine. And so I actually was still really struggling when I even retired from gymnastics, right? Like people think that when a gymnast quits or retires, like all of a sudden all the food and body image issues will go away. And I would argue that they actually often compound, especially just we know that transitions for athletes are really difficult. And so I actually went to college not really knowing what I wanted to do and decided to study nutrition really for the wrong reasons, right? Like I still wanted to figure out like, how can I get leaner? How can I lose weight? How can I, keep this gymnast body? And thankfully, like kind of 2 years into school, I changed my major a bunch of times and then was able to finally start therapy, which I really should have done, as a gymnast, right? But back in the day, there were just a lot of stereotypes, and I even saw like an eating disorder therapist and dietitian like twice, and it was not a good fit. And I was like 16 at the time, and it was very independent like most gymnasts and very mature. So, in my struggle, it was easy to convince my parents I was fine and didn't need that support. And they didn't really know what to do with that. And so I think sophomore year of college, like I finally got a good therapist that could kind of help me wade through everything. And then I had a little bit of an existential crisis of like, oh my gosh, I'm 2 years into this degree and it's kind of for the wrong reasons. But luckily, like deep down, I really did like nutrition. But at the time, I was not going to go into working with children, wanted nothing to do with that, wanted nothing to do with eating disorders, I think because I was just kind of very early in my own recovery. And then I spent the first few years, ironically, working in pediatric endocrinology, which we didn't get a lot of eating disorders. I had a few, like I had to work with adolescent medicine a little bit, but it probably wasn't until I opened my own practice that I realized you can't be a dietitian working with athletes, working with children and adolescents, and say that you don't do eating disorders. You know, like no one's
Right.
asking you to treat the hardcore clinical. You don't have to do that, but you have to be skilled because more than likely the clients walking through your doors, there's a high percentage of those who are struggling, and you need to know how to help them. You need to know how to refer out. You kind of need to know your scope of practice. And so, yeah, I feel like parts of my own journey, were redeemed in that way. And that's kind of where we are, where we are today.
And it's kind of funny how we go into things and we're like, oh, we're totally going to avoid this part of our profession. Oh, I don't want to do that. But you end up going there,
Yeah.
how you're drawn towards it, because
Yeah.
mine's kind of the same way too when it comes to trauma and crisis. And you're just like, okay, actually, I'm really good at this part. And now after you've worked through your own stuff, it can be really helpful to have that different perspective to help them through it.
100%, 100%. And I wouldn't trade it, right? I think all of us can say that, in the moment the struggle is raw and it hurts and it's hard, but you get to the other side and it's, I'm grateful I can share things I've learned with other families and even just kind of direct them to the right resources and really even encourage the parents of like, hey, I get how hard this is and your kid might even hate you right now for what kind of help and support you're trying to get them, but one day they will be grateful. So I think that inspires a lot of the work I do and that we do of just really trying to give parents their power back because it's easy to struggle silently and act like you have it all together, which is definitely characteristic of our gymnasts, right?
For sure. Yeah, because the area I wanted to start with, and I love that you said that because one of those misconceptions I hear so often is that because our sport is moving in a positive direction, like we're trying to change culture and grow, that a lot of times I hear people saying like, oh, well, we don't deal with eating disorders. Like we don't have those problems anymore. And I understand that it can look that way because a lot of times in our heads, when we think of eating disorders, like I said in the beginning, is we think of them in those extremes. Like you should be able to see this, but it starts very small. And I think starting with kind of discussing what those misconceptions can be might be helpful before we start getting into some of those like red flags and that nitty gritty details of it.
Yeah. I tell parents there is no one look to disordered eating or an eating disorder.
Right.
You can't look at a gymnast and decide whether or not you think they're struggling. And these struggles are often so private and so vulnerable that if a parent or coach does pick up on some sort of food or body image struggle, it's probably like 20 times worse than you
Right.
can kind of assess.
Yeah, and I think obviously gymnastics is headed in the right direction. You still,
For sure.
every time I think everything is good to go, I hear another story. But for the most part, I think it is headed in the right direction. And it seems like, as far as disordered eating goes, it's happening less often from the coach's side of things, where it used to be like, hey, let's weigh you in front of the team and let's talk about, it's happening less on that side, but probably more pressure now because of social media and all that sort of thing. It's more pressure internal versus external. Would you think that's true, Christina?
Yes, I would say in the past 6 years of working exclusively with gymnasts, I still hear kind of coach-driven issues every now and again, and it typically is at the highest level of our sport, right, in these kind of elite gyms. But I would agree. I think a lot of it is just the explosion of social media, right, like TikTok, skinny talk, diet culture. Like our tweens and teens have just access at their fingertips to what I call how-to eating disorder content that a lot of parents are completely unaware of, and so that's something we really encourage, our families is, I have a lot of feelings about social media, and obviously I understand it needs to be used for recruiting. Granted, you don't necessarily need that at 12 years old, but either way, like parents need to be in charge of that. They need to know what their kids are looking at. They need to see who their kids are messaging, who their kids are emailing. There's a lot that can be done in that way that didn't necessarily have to be done in our day because it didn't exist, right? When I was a gymnast, it was Facebook and it was a status update, a cute photo, right? Like it just, it's not the level
Picture
it
of your
is
dinner.
Oh, yeah, there's not
today.
the filters that are going on now and the
Yeah.
body trimming you can do. There's so many things that can happen now on social media.
Yeah. And you just see the people with the abnormal genetics too, where you just go, oh man, well, this person, that's all they do. And look how good they look. Right. And you're like, well, also, good grief, their genetics are just insane, or they're not revealing all that they're actually doing, or right. And there's There's all kinds of, right, because I like listening to strength and conditioning stuff, and so you get all the time somebody's like, "Oh, this is my workout," and like Dwayne the Rock Johnson is an example. Like you'll see his workouts online, you're like, that doesn't look that hard, but man, you're like 50 something and bulked up, and you're like, steroids. Okay, cool.
Yes, yes, I talk with my girls about that a lot of just the filters, the lies, right? Like, I mean, social
Yeah.
media, it's all smoke and mirrors, and so people can say whatever they wanna say. They can show a full day of eats of whatever they wanna show. They can
Hmm.
say, "Follow these 10 tips to, get abs like me," and who knows? They could have a raging eating disorder. They could just be genetically blessed in that way. And I think a lot of our adolescents and teens have a hard time understanding body diversity, right? Like,
Hmm.
you get what you get in terms of your genetics and how
Right.
tall your parents are and their body types and the hormonal influences on fat patterns and kind of where fat tends to distribute and deposit, even your muscles. All of that is influenced, and training and conditioning can only impact that so much, and like we're better off trying to optimize what we have versus trying to change into something that is just genetically not possible for our
Mhm.
bodies.
Do you talk about that a lot with the athletes you work with, how their body changes, their hormonal changes, how that makes their body look differently? Because I feel like a lot of parents, from my side of it, don't like having those discussions because they are uncomfortable discussions, like to talk about menstrual cycles and all this stuff with their daughters. And then we forget that because they're going through all these changes, their body will start changing, and then that self esteem can drop. They can get self conscious, and I just didn't know how much you actually do with yours because I figured we probably have to do quite a bit of it too.
Yeah, yeah, it's always something that's in the back of my mind. We get a lot of gymnasts who are just massively, what I call unintentionally underfueled, where there is not necessarily any sort of intentional restriction or eating disorder pathology. But sometimes the process of nutritional rehabilitation and weight restoration and like getting them to eat enough to catch up to genetically where they're supposed to be in order for them to stay healthy, sometimes that can bring to light some often just body image issues. And so, yeah, we talk a lot as it's appropriate, kind of based on the gymnast and kind of what we're sensing and what kind of comes up in discussion. And every parent has a different comfort level with that, right? Like some parents are able to be very matter of fact about it, and then others, like I'll hear them say things that I'm like, oh gosh, right? Like, don't say that because you can't promise that, right? Like, you can't ever tell someone, like, you're not going to get quote unquote overweight, right? Like, you're not God, like, you're not in control of what their body's going to look like. And not that any gymnast we work with is overweight, but I think people have such a skewed perception of what healthy is. Like when these gymnasts come to us and they truly are malnourished. Like if we're going to be technical about it, like their bodies are literally starving and eating themselves from the inside out. And that level of leanness and that level of like smallness is 99.99% of the time like not actually healthy or appropriate or functional for them. And so I think that can be hard for the gymnast, right? As her body adapts and grows and develops, like that transition can be difficult because gymnasts are very aware, right? Like, body awareness is something we teach in the sport. It's required to be successful, but with what comes with that is they're keenly aware of what they look like in a leotard. And I think even
Right.
for
Yeah.
parents, it can
Mhm.
be, it can be shocking or surprising to them as well. So, we don't want to plant seeds, right? Like, I don't want to say something and put something in a gymnast's head that she's not thinking, but definitely through our conversations, and especially if they're working with a good therapist, just kind of keeping tabs, especially if we're seeing some resistance. And that's usually what pings me is, if we get them on a fueling plan and they start growing and they're eating and they're feeling better and they're healing from their injuries and everything's going great, then it feels like they're in a pretty good spot mentally where like they might kind of be blissfully unaware about their body and the changes versus, we've been working together for a while and it's like, gosh, why are you still skipping your snack? Why are we still leaving half of our meal, right? We've tried to troubleshoot all the things. And so sometimes you can kind of get that spidey sense of like there might be something underneath this that we need to refer out to a good therapist to help kind of tease out why we're
Yeah.
stuck.
Yeah, for sure. I agree when I break things down to whether I have to refer them to someone like you because it's like, oh, this is a little bit more than where I was thinking it was going. Yeah, and it does take a little while to tease that stuff out sometimes. So what are some of the things getting started like with coaches specifically and parents? I know that our sport pulls in these amazing kids who are perfectionists, detail oriented, and those are kind of the traits that can be very prominent in ED symptoms or just disordered eating. And they also say that for just aesthetic sports, they're 2 to 3 times higher to get eating disorders or have disordered eating just because of like all the things you were talking about. So what are some of those signs that maybe you notice, but you're like, oh gosh, I wish parents and coaches really knew these things?
Yeah, great question. I think a big piece that's missing is parents and coaches understanding what is normal growth and development in puberty, because there's still a lot of misinformation in the sport that gymnasts are just small, that it's fine if they're not growing, you want them to be short anyways. It's fine if females don't get their menstrual cycles till 15 or 16, like that's normal for a gymnast. It's just because of the training, and none of that's normal, right? Like biology
And
doesn't
I'll hear
care.
that from physicians as well. They'll be,
Same.
"Oh, well, they're gymnasts, so probably 15 or so." Like, wait, what? Hang on. Why should that
No,
matter? That
no.
shouldn't matter.
Mm-mm.
No, I mean, the average age for a female to start their cycle is like 12. It's 12
Hmm.
years old, and it's plus or minus a little bit for different ethnicities. And I always tell parents, I'm like, look, the child and adolescent body, there's three things that we're trying to do in gymnastics, right? We're trying to grow and develop, repair, recover, and then adapt or get better, faster, stronger from our training. And the body's gonna get its way, and it wants that particular order. Ian and I work together with a ton of clients, and I always like to let him know, like, hey, I'm sending you this kid that, yes, we've had a million injuries, but, she's 3 years behind in growth and is
Hmm.
not developing. And that's playing a role in these injuries because she's not eating enough. And so your typical return to sport timeline, like, it's not going to work. Like, you're going to have
Right.
to use your clinical judgment and take things slower because her body's compromised. And so that's what I wish coaches understood. Like, I think a lot of us are still guilty of like the eyeball test, right? Like we look at gymnasts and decide like if they look healthy or not healthy, or if they're where they need to be. And I'm a professional, right? Like I've been looking at growth charts and assessing food journals and working with children and adolescents for 10 years. And I literally cannot look at a kid and tell you like what percentile they are in terms of height or what percentile they are in terms of weight. And then I also couldn't tell you just looking at them, like, are they on track for them? Like that
Hmm.
only comes from looking at historical growth and looking at genetics and then assessing the adequacy of their fueling and then what's happening in the gym in terms of performance and injuries and so on and so forth. And so I think starting there, I think if we could just better normalize that everyone has to go from point A to point B, like it's not a little girl sport, little boys sport, right? I think that could mitigate a lot of the offhanded comments that can kind of get in gymnasts' heads and start them down that path of disordered eating. So I think that's a big one. And we have a lot of free resources. I'm just like, I'm going to give it away, right? Like here's a free masterclass on how to read a growth chart, because more than likely you're seeing the pediatrician once a year and they may or may not look at the growth chart. And even if they do, they don't always know how to assess it in the context of a gymnast and body composition versus weight. And so for a lot of our parents, when we teach them that, they can look at the chart and say, oh gosh, I had no idea. Like I'm seeing it now. Like I'm seeing that she's not really grown in 2 or 3 years. I'm seeing that she's not gained enough weight. Like no wonder we're stuck struggling and injured. And I might need to wrestle with that. I think the truth is a lot of us in this sport, we're former gymnasts, right? And we have our own body image stuff and we have our own stuff that we heard from our coaches and our parents when we were growing up through the sport. And I think we have our own stuff that we need to wrestle with and unlearn and relearn and make sure that we're not projecting onto our athletes.
Yeah, that's why I love coming from the men's side of things. Because the men's side of things is if there's any body image stuff, it's like, hey, how strong can you get? Like, how big can your muscles be? Like, and that's, if there's going to be some body image issues, that's maybe a little bit healthier, but depending on how you're going about it, of course. But also coming from the mid side of things, I had like 5 or 6 teammates in college that were over 6 feet tall. And
Mhm.
granted, they didn't do rings, but they were, man, they were amazing tumblers and they were amazing vaulters, and high bar looks so cool when you're that tall. And, all these things looked really neat. And so, I'll get a tall gymnast on my team. I'm like, hey, cool. You're going to tumble like 6 feet higher than everyone else. And this is going to be amazing. We'll have to raise the ceilings. It'll be cool. And so, certainly in college, I probably had probably two or three teammates that had some disordered eating. But on a men's team, we would talk to them and be like, dude, what are you like? Eat some dinner. What are you doing right now? So we were more upfront with them and we knew what they were doing. And it's like, no, you got to be healthy. Let's go. We want you to be able to be on this team. So I don't know. Coming from the men's side of things, it's a lot different perspective, and I enjoy it.
We work with a lot of male upper level gymnasts, and I also really enjoy it because
Yeah.
they're a little bit easier in some ways. But I will say one of the most shocking things that I have seen at the collegiate and elite level is the male coaches, especially at those levels, they tend to be much, much, much more outspoken about lightness.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
there's
Yeah.
so much of a misunderstanding on the men's and the women's side of like, if you want to feel light, you have to be fueled, right? Like
Yeah.
when you feel heavy, slow, and sluggish, more than likely you're going into practice under fueled. Your muscles don't have enough carbohydrate, right? Like you're kind of in the twilight zone. And I've had male gymnasts where they step on the scale every day before they go into the gym, but it's completely random because like practice is in the afternoon and you've had nutrition and you've had hydration, but then they start to play mind games of gymnasts are very numbers oriented. And so then
Hmm.
it's like, well, I'm not going to eat my full lunch because like I was kind of heavy yesterday and I want to be lighter today. Like just we start to play some weird games that I wasn't really expecting that from the men's
Yeah.
side, right? Like I thought it would be much more of like, yeah, strong muscles, power, whatever. And so just a lot of re-education. And I find that our gymnasts who get it. Right? Like when they understand, wait a second, like me dehydrating myself and not eating all day, like that's why I feel heavy and can't get off the floor. But I think on the men's side, what's a little different than the women is like P-bars, pommel, rings, like those are such kind of body weight, muscle dependent events, right? Versus females, not as much, maybe the uneven bars, right? We're not having to hold ourselves up as much as
Hmm.
those three events. That I think that's why there's kind of much more chatter, on that
Yeah.
side of things. And even this time of the year with competitions. Coaches will, the last thing before they dismiss the team on Friday night before the meet, it's like, make good choices with food, eat healthy, eat light. And it's like, wait a second, like healthy and adequate are not the same things.
Right.
And
Yeah.
fueling to feel your best is not the same as trying to put less volume in your stomach. So I think
Yeah.
those are, yeah, some subtle examples that, if I think we just understood the physiology better, we wouldn't say some of these things that can be
Right.
misconstrued.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I guess for me, like I always saw, men growing up and saw people like Jason Gatson, who was just a monster. I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard a story at one point in time where his coaches told him to stop doing conditioning because he was just getting too big. I was like, what? This is ridiculous.
The muscles are
That's
getting in the
crazy.
way.
Your muscles are getting in the way. Good heavens. And then people like even newer, like younger guys like Jake Dalton or, man, these guys are just so muscled up. I'm like, all right, well, it's not a lightness thing. Good grief. Those guys are, if you're going to look at what a normal weight would be for them if they were just a normal person, not an athlete, you're like, they're probably like 30 pounds overweight or something, you know, but it's all muscle and they're performing at the top of their game and it's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of discussions about body composition. And obviously, at the collegiate and elite level, often there's body fat testing done, whether it's part of what they get at Olympic Training Center or just access at their university. And that's also something that drives me crazy is gymnasts often think they can maintain a certain level of leanness all year round without consequence. And I'm like, you're not a bodybuilder, right? Like that's aesthetics. And people who bodybuild or compete in physique, you're dieting down to super physiological levels of leanness that are the complete opposite of health, right? Those aren't functional bodies that work hormonally, that can build muscle, that can repair and recover. And so it's if you want to look like that, all right, go do that, right? But that's not functional. It's not what you need for gymnastics. And I think, Rebecca, that's where that type A perfectionism gets in the way and a lot of just body dysmorphia, right? The
Mhm.
way that you see yourself is not actually what your body looks like. And it's the same in gymnastics, right? Like as a coach, I mean, Ian, you're like, oh, that was a great series, right? And the gymnast was like, that was awful, And so same
Yep.
thing of like, yeah, that's why I tell parents we don't make body comments. Like we don't make positive or negative body comments because we live in a culture where we love to comment. Oh, girl, you look so good. You lose weight. You look skinny. Wow, like those abs are rocking today. That's the culture we live in. But when you have someone who's already a perfectionist or is already struggling with body dysmorphia, you can't control how that comment lands. And so, number one, you might be fueling some sort of dysfunctional relationship with food or disordered eating. Or two, you're just going to be met with disgust, right? Of like, no, I'm still fat, or no, that floor routine was awful, or no. So I'm like, you can't win. So like, let's
Right.
keep comments focused on generally more performance, which maybe Rebecca isn't even the best, but just stuff like, gosh, you're such a good teammate today. Like, hey, I'm really proud of you for how you fought through XYZ this week. Or like, hey, thanks for stepping in on bars and pulling the mats for her. Like trying to find other ways to affirm that aren't body related.
And if you change your mindset and try to do that, it can be really hard because you're like, oh my gosh, I do affirm this way so often, and we just don't even realize it. Another interesting thing too, and you can let me know if you see this as well, but I find that a lot of eating disorders or underfueling stuff, it doesn't actually first stem from their idea of how their body looks. It kind of stems from this control, this perfectionism, these things that they're wanting to do in gymnastics, and that pressure to meet certain expectations, whether that's from coaches or from parents. And it turns into, well, I didn't eat that much today, and then I performed really well at practice, or this competition went well, and they start to make these associations where they're like, oh, so if I do this, then I get this result. Do you see that too?
Yes, I would say that's kind of the hallmark, very dichotomous thinking, right, that we see in adolescents and how their brains work. Yesterday, I was like planning competition fueling with one of my 15-year-old level nines, and she was like, I only want an acai bowl before my 8 a.m. meet. Like, I just had the best meet I've had since level 7. And I'm like, girl, you're going to Vegas. Like, the hotel you're staying at, look at the menus. It's a whole different food situation, and you're competing at 8 a.m. and you need to eat at 6 a.m. And like, sure, your mom can try to DoorDash you an acai bowl, but what if that's not available? Like, we need to not be married to that and decide in our mind that if we can't eat that, like, we're going to fall apart and not perform. And so I think it's the same thing with, I hate the word clean eating. Like, I don't use it. And I understand like eating healthfully, and I understand like we all want our children and teens to eat a wide variety of nutrient dense foods. That is always the ultimate goal. But I think a lot of gymnasts think that food is good or bad from a performance standpoint of, if I were to eat this, then I'm going to feel awful and fall all over the place and have the worst meet of my life. Or even sometimes we can perpetuate that of like, it's been a rough day at the gym and someone might be like, well, what'd you eat before? And often it's not the actual food items itself. It's just whether or not it's adequate throughout the day, and then also just the right things at the right time. And so, yeah, I mean, there's something called orthorexia that's not an official DSM-5 eating disorder diagnosis, but the way I see that play out is it actually can lead to a lot of binging and food sneaking and very dysfunctional relationships with food where, we already have these athletes who are trying to achieve perfection. And I always say that with nutrition, perfection is not possible, but it's kind of that good or bad mindset of like, oh, I didn't eat that much today, so I'm going to like treat myself to this. Or, oh, it's comp season, so I'm not going to eat sugar anymore. Or I'm going to eat clean the whole time. But then Christmas comes and you spot grandma's, famous cookies on the table, and then you eat one and feel guilty and then say, oh, what the heck, I blew it. Like, I'm going to eat 10. And that's that black or white thinking, right? Dichotomous thinking that I even see creep into gymnastics, right? Like
Oh, all the time.
I had a former elite a few years ago that was struggling with binging, and she had a back injury, and her mom was a medical provider, and she saw a really gymnastic specific physical therapist, and the physical therapist was like, you need to cut the gluten and the dairy and the sugar. Like, that's why your back's inflamed. And I'm like, no, her back's inflamed because she's trained 30 hours a week for years and years and years and has never taken the time off. And so that advice, while I understand it, one, it's not actually merited in the science, but two, it just perpetuated her restriction and her binging. And then I asked her, what was going on in the gym. And I'm like, tell me about vault. And she was like, yeah, if I don't feel right on that warm up, like, I'm not going to go. I just won't vault. I won't do the whole rotation. And I was like, oh, interesting. Cause that's the same thing you do with food is like you make one mistake with food and then you just binge your face off because you've already ruined everything. And the same thing was in her gymnastics. So I like sent her to one of our really good, eating disorder psychologists who's also a sports psychologist, because clearly those things are kind of bleeding into both areas.
With my gymnast is they will bring up things that I have to like wash. They'll be
Yeah.
like, oh, I just wish I could have abs. And I'm like, all right, well, hang on. Like not every girl especially is meant to have abs. Genetics are a real thing, and some of you might, but I would say probably the majority don't. After puberty, of course. Like
Hmm.
Hmm.
prior to puberty, whatever. But after puberty, it's one of those like probably most of you won't be able to be healthy and have abs. So it's squashing those conversations of like, well, no, probably not. Let's move on. And trying not to get into, talks about like fatty deposits and hormones. I'm like, no, we're on bars right now. Let's go ahead and do some
Let's focus
bars.
on bars.
Yes. And I
Mm.
think that education piece too. Be like, hey, girl, as a female, like we have to have a certain amount of body fat in order for our bodies to function right. And so, like you said, like what you looked like prepubescently is not what you're going to look like and be healthy, right? And like
Yeah.
choose what you want. Like, do you want abs or do you want to actually be able to stay healthy and participate in the sport and do gymnastics? And I don't take on a lot of eating disorder clients these days. They require a lot of just multidisciplinary support kind of on a weekly basis, and obviously I feel like in person is often best for that, so we typically refer those out. But every now and again I'll take a high level that is more on just kind of the disordered eating spectrum. And what I enjoy working with gymnasts, versus non-gymnasts, is you have that gymnastics carrot to dangle.
Yeah.
It's like, hey girl, you have a D1 scholarship. Like this isn't the year to mess around. Like we need support and it's me, and let's get in with the psychologist. And yeah, I get that you're 16, 17. Let's see how it goes. But if we're not where we need to be, like let's loop in mom and dad, because like your body's your instrument. And I think, the collegiate level and the way things are going, like that's a business transaction. And so kind of helping them see like it's not worth it, right? Like there's a cost to starving yourself and trying to look a certain way in a bathing suit that, to be honest, with the body dysmorphia, no one notices. So can be helpful, I feel like, in that way. But we also, I'll get parents who they'll want to work with us, and it's clear that their kid is very, very deep in a pretty serious eating disorder, and they are already working with an eating disorder dietitian and eating disorder therapist, which is super appropriate. But they'll say, well, we don't like them. We want to work with you. Like, we want to work with someone who understands gymnastics. And I'm like, look, you're not ready for that. And of course, your kid doesn't like the dietitian and therapist, because what they're making them do, right, making them eat and fuel their body, is exactly what the eating disorder doesn't want. And it's uncomfortable.
Hmm.
So it's hard to kind of explain that and hold the line in that way. I felt the same way, right? Like the eating disorder dietitian and therapist I saw twice, at 16. I made up a lot of my own assumptions about them, based on what they looked like and their body, and they didn't know gymnastics at all. And so it was hard to connect in that way. But instead of me just quitting treatment, which is what I did, there probably would have been other practitioners out there who could have been a good fit, or it would have just taken time. Like I probably would have continued to kick and scream for a while, and that's where I needed my parents to like step in and put their foot down. And I wish they would have done that. And that's what I tell parents of, like, as hard as it is, if my parents had not believed me, which I can't fault them, I would have gotten better a lot faster, right? Like I wouldn't have continued to struggle for the next probably 10 years. So yeah, just kind of food for thought for those parents listening as well.
Yeah. I love that you were like, you're not going to really like your dietitian. You're not going to like your therapist. Because I always start my sessions out like that. I say therapists are like shoes. Like first, like, you got to find the right one that fits. Like you have to feel like you're comfortable with them to actually share those vulnerable aspects of your life. But also, if you are coming to sessions with me and you like me every time you're coming, then I'm not doing my job, because I should be challenging you. And there are going to be times when you leave and you don't like me at all. And that's okay, because that means I'm getting you to think. And like you said, I remember that from my experience in therapy when I was in college. I remember I would go home sometimes and literally my therapist ruined my day. I was like, I hate her. And I would be like, I just wanted to lay in bed all day. And I'm just like, seriously, ruined my day. But she was one of the best therapists I had ever had. So you have to have a good balance when it comes to that stuff. You can't push them too hard, and you got to pull them back in. So yeah, as a clinician, it's really difficult. But also, yes, parents, like, great advice. Remember, just because your child is feeling discomfort, and I know we hate when our children are in discomfort, they're unhappy, things aren't going well, and we want quick solutions. this stuff, there's not quick solutions. So you have to have that patience. You have to be willing to push and kind of be there. And I kind of wanted to see, like, I know that we all know why a lot of our gymnasts don't speak up when it comes to this stuff because we think it's normal. Like, we're like, oh, well, I'm just eating like my teammates eating or whatever it is.
Hmm.
But what are some other reasons that maybe all of you see that maybe why some of our athletes wouldn't speak up about this stuff and want to share their struggles or try to get some assistance when it comes to disordered eating and how it's impacted them?
Hmm.
I like
I
your
think
face, Ian.
I think there's a lot of stigma still,
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
Like, even I know I feel like just years ago, like if you got sent to the dietitian, it's because someone thought that you were like quote unquote fat, like versus this really proactive and preventive approach of like, no, like we're just literally trying to optimize every aspect of fueling. And so I think a lot of people still have that mindset of like, I don't need a dietitian unless I'm struggling, or if the gymnast is struggling with food in their body, they often think it's not bad enough to
Hmm.
warrant help or to warrant speaking up. And then I think what's mirrored to them on social media can make their struggle seem like a walk in the park. I think what's killing a lot of us right now is watching, what's happening with Ozempic and the GLP-1s and people getting access to those who they are not meant for,
Right.
and watching the Hollywood celebrities like literally waste away before our eyes. And our gymnasts are watching that, and they're watching these bodies that are just not reality, and yet they think that they're normal, right? Because like often they don't have even the conception to understand kind of what they're seeing. So even just stuff like that, I think can then make them feel like, oh, well, I'm not like there's fine, right? Like there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not skinny enough. That was part of mine. At the worst of my disordered eating, I had lost a lot of weight. Like, I don't know, 10, 15 plus pounds. And I lost my period and I was cold all the time. My hair was falling out. My body wasn't functioning and my muscles were seizing up at gym. I was in a bad spot, but I was not your poster child, stereotypical like skin and bones, anorexia nervosa kind
Hmm.
of image
Yeah.
that people depict. And I think you alluded to that earlier on. Like, we still see that. There still absolutely are people with serious eating disorders that are so malnourished and wasted away. That's not functional in gymnastics. If it got
Right.
that bad, you wouldn't be able to do anything. And so I think there's a lot more almost kind of subclinical, or gymnasts just have a lot more muscle mass to start with. So
Right.
even if there is,
A
weight
lot more
loss or
for their
issues like
bodies to feed
that.
off of.
Exactly,
Yeah. So they
exactly.
look normal.
Exactly, and it might even get praised, right? It might even be
Mm-hmm.
like, "Wow, you look so good, like, you've slimmed down," and it's never appropriate for, like, a child or adolescent to lose weight. Like, I think I saw a Facebook post the other day where a parent was like, "My, I don't know, level 5, like, lost 3 pounds." Most of the parents were like, "Oh my god, that's horrible, like, kids shouldn't be losing weight," but then some parents were like, "Oh, it's not a big deal." I am like, "Oh
Yeah,
my
it is.
gosh," right? Like, that's where it starts of like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay," or we get a lot of gymnasts that come to us struggling because they actually got put on a diet by parent and pediatrician when
Hmm.
they started to go through puberty because their body started changing, they started gaining weight, like all the normal things that needed to happen, but parent and pediatrician were not educated appropriately. And so then they felt like, oh, wow, you have gained a lot of weight. Like, hey, let's cut back. Like, yeah, it's okay if you lose, 5 or 10 pounds. So we'll get parents who are like, oh, yeah, like pediatrician said it was okay. And it's like, yeah, then we lost 15 and we gained 25 back. And now your kid has like a raging eating disorder. And had we just allowed biology to take its course and had some education and looked at her growth charts and understood like what was normal, we actually would be in a better spot today
Yeah.
than
Yeah, I
had
think
we
that
messed with it.
that was something. I don't remember if it was you that I was talking to that taught me this, and this was years ago, but how kids will gain excess weight right before they grow. And that was a huge thing that I had no idea about at that time. But now I see it all the time. I'm like, oh yeah, it's, the little cute little pudgy kid, right? And then 2 months later you're like, oh, you just shot up 3 inches. Okay, cool. That's what it was. Right. And that happens all the time.
Yes, and that's where I go back to, like, from a prevention standpoint, just education, right? Like, if parents and coaches understood that, especially your female, as she's in that preteen phase, like, we do see extra abdominal fat. Like, that's the
Hmm.
body preparing to redistribute that eventually to the breast and to the hips. And so it's not that she all of a sudden got a little belly because of what she was eating. This is
Right.
just biology. And if she's also ravenous at the same time, yeah, that's exactly what happens before the massive growth spurt. Like I tell parents, at growth spurt calorically, they'll never need more nutrition in their life than that time frame. And
Yeah.
so you
Especially
just
while they're
roll with
doing
it.
gymnastics. It's like,
Mhm.
Also
yeah,
that, right? Like all
yeah,
of these kids are training, 15, 18, 20 plus hours a week on top of it. And
yeah.
so,
Yeah, if they're not out eating mom and dad, you're probably not eating enough,
Yeah,
right?
and I think that's where that comes in from, like, the coach's standpoint too, or even from the parent standpoint or the public eye. These kids leave their house at 6 o'clock in the morning and don't get home until sometimes 9:30 at night. Who's
Yeah.
packing for that food, for that fuel? And what are they packing for that food, for that fuel? And who's talking about, do they have the food or the fuel for the whole day? You're leaving your house, like, think about, for myself, I'm walking out the house with a lunchbox and 3 meals because I'm gonna be at the gym from 10 AM until 10 PM. That's 12 hours, and I can't sub that food in with a pack of goldfish, a protein bar, meat stick. I mean, those are all great little things. If I've had a nice lunch, did I have a breakfast? When is dinner? So the coaches have to be on board with how to attack that plan as a fueling plan with parents. And, the parents are the ones that are just, "Well, let's just open up a lunchbox and stick in a pack of cookies, a bag of Doritos, and, here's some goldfish, and then here's some pretzels." And then, I'm not saying that all dietitians would say, "Oh, those are great snacks." Like, yeah, but not every single day. You can't open up 6 different packages of, packaged processed food 6 times a day, 5 days a week for fuel for gymnastics or any elite sport at that matter. So I think that becomes an
Yeah.
important role. And sometimes that's where their disordered eating can even come from. It's like they don't really know what it's like to sit down and eat a meal. They're on the go all the time. And
Mhm.
I know it's like more common than uncommon about after 35 years of being in this sport, this, that, my foods can't touch or they don't eat anything white or some of my 23 or 24-year-old staff members, I say they eat like 12-year-olds because they're still eating chicken fingers and, mac and cheese in the microwave. And then, they got 3 bags of M&Ms that they wolf down and then, okay, I need a bag of chips.
And off to coaching.
And I'm like, wow, what's going on there?
Right. Yeah, I was like, coming from, Rob's background where you did some bodybuilding training for people and that sort of thing, you would have these people that would pack these lunch boxes, I'm sure, this gigantic thing. You're like, oh, that's so ridiculous. And you actually get some knowledge and some wisdom to, and you look back and you go, actually, that's probably fairly appropriate for maybe some of our athletes too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember flying out to the Arnold with, like, 2 competitors that were competing, and, we had 20 chicken breasts and 15 sweet potatoes, and, like, you go through the airport with these big, huge, coolie bags, and they're trying to tell you that, you can't bring ice or this or that. I'm thinking, "What?" So we were packing for ice packs, we were packing frozen spinach as our ice packs because they wouldn't let you bring an ice pack because it was liquid, but, you're literally going out the door with 2 weeks worth of food for these athletes because 'cause you're gonna be someplace where you're gonna need to fuel. And it is not at the extreme of an athlete, or a gymnast, but actually, to me, it really is an extreme. They need to be fueled, and they need to be fueling all day.
yeah, I would say that's a huge part of our struggle, especially working with pediatric and adolescents, is often what our gymnasts are eating is not as healthy as I would prefer it to be. But we get so many kids with just extreme picky eating, with sensory issues. We get parents who don't cook anymore, who don't want to cook, who
Mhm.
just want to rely on fast food. And, we have to prioritize when I get a kid that's massively underweight, stunted in height, like my first prerogative is just to get enough calories in that kid. Cause like no amount of kale or chicken breast or chickpeas is going to save them if they're still in a caloric deficit. And we also find that when the brain's underfueled, it views new foods as a threat. Your
Mm.
kid's brain is going to be wholly uninterested in trying the broccoli when the brain thinks that it's starving to death and dying. And so if we can work with someone long enough, we can get them to that nutrient, diversity and anti-inflammatory and all of that, but it takes a while. Like I saw a kid yesterday I've been working with for probably 2 years, and it has taken us almost that time to get her back to her normal growth curve because she was just that underfueled, picky eater, ADHD, side effects from the ADHD meds. And so, for 2 years it's just been like whatever you're willing to eat, like whatever protein, whatever carb, whatever fat, like we're
Just do
so
it.
picky, we're so finicky. But
Yeah.
finally yesterday, like we were able to have a discussion of like, okay, growth is awesome. Like you're crushing it with the food. Now it's time to bring in advanced strategies. Like you're 14. Like it is time to get more fruits. It's time to get more veggies. Like, in the back of my head, I know that she's going to quit the sport one day. And how she currently is eating is not going to be super supportive of long term health when you don't have that like 25 hours a week of training. And so it's hard because we get a lot of parents who immediately want to jump to the healthy of like, I don't like her food choices and you need to make her eat healthier and she eats too many snacks. And it's like, well, but if you're not making dinner, right?
Right.
If she's not exposed to these foods, like how is she going to learn? Or even just, a lot of our kids train really late, right? Like 4 to 8, 5 to 9. And so, parents will hear that, eating late's bad and it's going to cause weight gain or whatnot. And I'm like, not true, right? For a gymnast. And then I don't know about y'all, but like I don't have dinner ready at 4. And so I'd much rather you bring your gymnast a real dinner at 9 o'clock in the car so that she can get protein and vegetables and calcium and fat and like quality nutrition versus just feeding her a bunch of snacks before gym and then bringing a bunch more snacks or not bringing her anything. And she just raids the pantry when she gets home. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the meal
Because
piece.
she's not gonna cook a meal at 9:30 at night.
No, she's gonna go shower to get the chalk off, and then she's gonna go to the pantry and she's gonna grab like pretzels and fruit snacks and popcorn and go to bed, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
All the
no
easy
quality
stuff.
fats, no
No
protein,
protein,
no
no
color.
And that seems to
Yeah.
be like the most difficult thing for those kids is the parents that do prepare like the snacks that's got, well, this kid's got some cucumbers and then there's some tomatoes and there's some apple and peanut butter. And yes, there's a bag of goldfish in there, but look at all those other things that they had on top of that. And so I see it in the NCAA, the teams, specifically the gymnasts, or you could take any of the sports for that matter, but let's stick to gymnastics because that's what we're here to talk about. They'll pack these kids full of snacks for bus rides.
Mm.
You see the big Ziploc bags that these gymnasts are walking around with snacks that the school gave them, and it's, the gallon size, and it's filled. And I'm like, so they're going to eat that the whole bus ride to wherever they're going, and then when they get there, they had Chipotle delivered. They're always delivering food to the kids. There's not like, okay, we went into the ballroom and the chef prepared for us. There's some steak and there's some pasta and there's a salad and there's some, there's nothing was prepared. They ordered it out. How healthy was that food prepared at a restaurant? And so essentially they're still eating fast foods and they're getting packed with snacks. So how is the NCAA helping them? Or, I'm not trashing NCAA. How is the university trying to make sure that the kids are staying on track with their food? And then there's the kid who mom did prepare all the correct foods for them, and then they're at school and they don't know what to do themselves. That's the biggest problem that I've run into in my career with these kids. So we talk, and being in the bodybuilding industry and nutrition, we talk about our fuels and what are good fuels and what are good snacks, and that they need to know how to prepare 2 to 3 meals. I have a gymnast that's at a university, and all the girls live on one floor. And there's 6 rooms, and the first 10 weekends from freshman time, they do family dinner on Sunday. They have each room prepare a dinner, and this way, at the end of 10 weeks, you have 10 meals that you know how to cook or learned how to cook. So
Agreed. And that's why we try to get parents to start early because it's already a transition to college, being on your own and mom and dad not supporting. And a lot of these gymnasts, these days, sometimes they don't even have meal plans. Like I've had a lot of collegiate gymnasts where the
Really?
team will just cater in dinner a few nights a week. And then you have like kind of like dining dollars the other
Yeah.
nights of the week to go to like local establishments. And one of my gymnasts last year, I was like, all right, what was for dinner? And she was like, oh, we go get an acai bowl most night. And I'm like, look, girl, like 200 grams of carbs and a bunch of peanut butter, but like no protein, no veggie. Like that's not a meal, right? Like your mom used to make like chicken and broccoli and a pasta or brown rice, right? Like remember what dinners were? Like if you want to have a smaller version of that for a snack, like, okay, cool, great. But that's not what you need, especially because like you're only training 2.5, 3 hours a day now, right? Like it's
right.
not your 5 hours that you had in club gymnastics.
That I think becomes like very, very important for the people that are listening to this podcast to understand. And it's more often than not that these collegiate programs are not doing meal plans. So it's like, okay, well, here's your $3,500 stipend per month. You pay for your rent out of that, and the rest you have to spend on your food. And oh, by the way, we have lunch meat down at the gym for you. Stop in, get lunch anytime you want, or there's a grab and go. So they grab a protein shake or they grab a bag of chips or a goldfish. And so then they're home and it's dinner and they're training 15 hours a week instead of 20 hours a week or 25 hours a week. It's half the amount, right? And so the workouts are certainly not the same as what they were in club. It's get in, get your assignment done, get out, right? And it's the faster you do that, I can get back home and study. And so all of those things come into play. Well, did they fuel for that time of day? What time are they training? Are they training at a different time than they're used to? When some kids are training from 1 to 5 and now they're at college and they're training from 3 to 6 or 3 to 7. Totally different mindset. They need the education. And when they're on their own, like you say, that'd be great. Remember what mom made for dinner and pack that up and break it into two. And there you go. There's 2 good snacks for you. So, but
Yeah, the
easier
best
said
thing my
than
mom got me yeah. The best thing my mom got me going off to college, she got me a cookbook that was a 5-ingredient cookbook.
there you go.
And so it was just 5 ingredients for each meal or thing that you would make, and I'd pick like 7 or 8 things out of there that I could start to make really well. And once I got into a little bit junior year, but mostly senior year, I was in like a senior suite where it wasn't just a normal dorm room. It was, like 4 or 5 of us all together. And so then I, reduced my dining hall thing,
Yeah, yeah, your
to
meal.
where it was just 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day. Then I would have to cook. But what I would do is I would just like cook a pan of enchiladas on Sunday night. And then I would just eat some enchiladas every night. And then I would cook lasagna the next week and I would eat some there's easy ways to do it. But yeah, if they're not educated on how to do it, why on earth would they? Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
And I think if, eating disorder prevention starts early because we have to have kids eating enough to support normal growth and development in what they're doing in the gym so that we don't have these massive swings in growth and body weight when they do stop or they do get injured or they do cut their hours in half. And I think we get a lot of gymnasts, in college or in high school that we're never eating enough to start with. And so then when the situation changes, there could be a lot of body changes and sometimes it's normal and necessary, but then that can then play into dysfunctional behaviors with food that I think we could have mitigated earlier on if we were, periodizing nutrition, right? Like truly eating for what we're doing, right? And in the different phase and the volume. And so a lot of these college kids, then it just turns into like, well, I'm just going to not eat anything and the quality is not there. The macronutrients aren't there, and then we're hungry, and then we binge, or we go to the parties on the weekends, and you're eating and drinking, right? Like, and it just spirals into dysfunction that often just persists through adulthood. And I tell parents, look, like, these are life skills. You invest in a lot with gymnastics, and the life lessons, you're always going to get a return on investment. But teaching your kid how to fuel their body, right? Like, that's a life skill that we should be learning regardless.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Right, the earlier that happens, the easier it becomes. Not like have to do this because I'm an athlete. It just becomes a lifestyle.
Prevention for a lot of this stuff is so important, like we're discussing. And that's why, my dream for gymnastics is that we're doing holistic programs where they're getting all this education. I would love that. Combining mental training with the nutrition, because a lot of that stuff flows into each other. Injury, all of it flows together, and their ability to navigate negative self-talk and all of these different things, coping skills. And if we can start some of that education early, it's so important. So if we have coaches, gyms, parents listening right now, and they're like, okay, this is a lot of information. Obviously, I want to try to help my child in all of these areas, but it gets very overwhelming. So what is one tip that you think you could give, whether it's parents or it's gyms, and whether it's how they talk about food, whether it's how they talk about body? What do you think is something that they can start now that you think could maybe help with that impact for?
For us, it's always just eating enough because, like I said, you're not going to make a lot of progress with picky eating when the body and the brain are underfueled, right? It's just not interested because it truly is in fight or flight or in survival mode. And so I think, especially when you have kids training 15 plus 20 hours a week, they often are not intuitively going to be hungry for the amount of food that they need, or they're not going to be hungry for or want to eat it when they need it. And so I think if parents can first learn that, healthy and adequate can coexist, but adequate comes first, I think we would make a lot of progress in that way. of
Yeah.
just keeping kids progressing in the sport.
Just coming to a close. So, Christina, before we wrap up, can you tell everyone where they can find you, your practice, your program, and stuff? Because I know that your content is amazing. So, if we can get anyone to follow you and to learn as much as they can from you, that would be so great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So you can find us on Instagram, social media at the Gymnast Nutritionist, and we put out tons of content just trying to really raise awareness for parents and coaches and gymnasts on different topics. And then if you want something deeper, we have a podcast that we've been recording for about 3 years now. I think we've got 180 plus episodes. That really is just a treasure trove of free information, and that's my way to give back to the sport is really just trying to give parents things that they can listen to while they're driving to work, driving to school, even for coaches. Like, a lot of our content is so educational and helpful for coaches, to unlearn and relearn. We've got a blog, so if you prefer to read, which I feel like has come back in vogue this year, right, with
I'm a big
Substack.
fan.
Yeah, so we've got lots of blogs if you want to read things and you're kind of more visual. And then obviously we work with gyms, we do team talks, we have a program that we work with gymnasts one-on-one. So we try to just cast a wide net to meet people where they're at, and keep changing conversation in this sport with the goal of keeping kids in longer, right? Like, we know that the attrition is high, and I think a lot of it is just, burnout from underfueling, injuries from underfueling and improper nutrition, and then how that plays into the mental piece. And we're all here because we love the sport and how it changed and enhanced our lives. And so I just don't want gymnasts to quit feeling like there was something wrong with them, right? That their body couldn't handle it, that they just weren't cut out for it, when maybe they just never were given the chance with the right training, the right conditioning, the right mental coaching, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I had so much fun talking about this stuff, even though this is one of those conversations that is not usually happening as often, but it should. And hopefully this starts more conversations, more awareness when it comes to eating disorders and just disordered eating in general. So when coaches and parents understand what they look for, they have a better position to support their athletes in catching problems before it escalates, physically, mentally, nutritionally, all of those things. So thank you so much for joining us, sharing your story, helping us work through nutrition, eating disorders, all of the things. Follow Christina if you want to learn more. And if this episode was helpful, we encourage you to share it with other coaches, parents, anyone who could benefit from the conversation. And thank you for joining us here at the NGA podcast. Until next time, stay happy, healthy, and high performing.